Hello everyone, welcome back to the APRO DBQ review, and today's topic is analysis and reasoning. Today we'll discuss the AP exam and the DBQ rubric, the analysis and reasoning point, the sourcing documents via HIP, complex understanding, guidelines for analysis and reasoning, and the supplemental. As a review, our AP Euro exam is on May 13th at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. It is a modified document-based question. Today we'll be focusing on using two documents to support an argument via HIP and corroborating, qualifying, or modifying an argument to demonstrate complex understanding. This year's analysis rubric has changed. It is now worth 3 points out of the total 10 on the AP History rubric, and the analysis point is split into two parts. Sourcing documents via HIP worth up to 2 points, and complex understanding worth up to 1 point. Let's go over the first portion, which is sourcing documents via the acronym HIP. For one document to earn 1 point, you must explain how or why the document's point of view, purpose, historical situation, and/or audience is relevant to an argument. To earn 2 points for a second document, explain how or why the document's point of view, purpose, historical situation, and/or audience is relevant to the argument. So the response must not just simply identify that, but also expand on how or why that is significant to the argument. And you only need to do one of those 4 things to earn the point for that document. Let's go over the acronym for HIP. The H stands for historical context, which is the historical context or setting behind that document and the developments happening during that time period. The I stands for intended audience, who is this document being written to and who is reading it. Next up is P for point of view, the author's perspective, opinion, and background matter on the subject. And lastly is purpose, why is the author writing this document and the main goal behind it. The DBQ question example for today will be evaluate whether or not the Glorious Revolution of 1688 can be considered part of the Enlightenment. Okay, so let's go over historical context. The document is in the English Bill of Rights, which outlines rights to Parliament and the Crown and protects rights to Protestants. Given that the English Bill of Rights was passed immediately following the Glorious Revolution and the end of James II's rule, it is meant to safeguard the rights of the citizens and to hold Parliament to be the ultimate power. It notes how the English Bill of Rights was written after the Glorious Revolution, and the fact that it was written after and supports the Glorious Revolution is noting the historical context, along with why is that significant to the argument. Next is intended audience. The document is William's Declaration. It claims that invasion is to protect the rights of Protestants in Parliament. This source is somewhat unreliable because while it does come directly from the king, it is a declaration and may therefore hide William's true feelings in an attempt to gain support from the citizens. It recognizes that their document may have been manipulated in order to appeal to the intended audience of the citizens, so it shows the intended audience of the citizens and notes why it's significant in its way of manipulating the information. Third, we have point of view. The document is Letters on the English by Voltaire. It notes English have successfully restrained monarchical power and other countries have not, in spite of similar conflicts. This excerpt reflected Voltaire's personality in many ways since he disliked the absolute monarchy in France during the 18th century and had a positive view of England. It explains how Voltaire's point of view in disliking the France monarchy would make him support the Glorious Revolution and the constitutional monarch they have there. So it notes the point of view of Voltaire and why that's significant in the document and argument. Lastly, we have purpose. This is William's declaration once again, and in many ways, William might have exaggerated his duty to cement his place as a ruler and may have vehemently supported Protestantism to earn the favor of the British people. Regardless, he did strengthen the religion, delivering on his promise. It notes how William wanted to be seen as legitimate and popular and how that affects the argument in saying that he had to strengthen the religion to deliver on his promise and be seen as legitimate and popular. It notes the purpose of the document and why that's significant in the argument. Let's move on to complex understanding, which is demonstrating a complex understanding of the historical development that is the focus of the prompt, using evidence to corroborate, qualify, or modify an argument that addresses the question. It is worth up to 1 point. Here's the criteria for complex understanding. Explaining nuance of an issue by analyzing multiple variables. Explaining both similarity and difference, or both continuity and change, multiple causes, or explaining both cause and effect. Third, explaining relevant and insightful connections within and across periods. Fourth, confirming the validity of an argument by corroborating multiple perspectives across themes. And lastly, qualifying or modifying an argument by considering diverse or alternative views of evidence. To earn the 1 point for conflict understanding, you only need to do one of these 5 things to earn that point. You do not need to do all of them. Also, keep in mind this understanding must be a part of your argument and not be a phrase or reference. It has to be well developed. Another note is that the second part, which is similarity and difference, continuity and change, and etc., are dependent on the question you receive, so we'll deal with that after we go through all the other examples, so we can really focus on that one on a per question basis. The question for most of the documents will be evaluate whether the 30 Years' War was fought primarily for religious or primarily for political reasons. First, let's jump into nuance. We're going to have to explain nuance of an issue by analyzing multiple variables. The document being used is a Richelieu engraving, which portrays the cardinal protecting France from Huguenot Protestants and rival Catholic powers. The response acknowledges that Cardinal Richelieu in document 6 is achieving political gains and using religion as an excuse. As a politique, he is willing to disregard his religious beliefs in favor of the state. He is killing 2 birds with 1 stone by removing Huguenots and increasing unity in France. Along with Adolphus, these leaders are extending the security of their states and increasing their power. The response explains nuance of an issue by analyzing how a ruler can use religious or political motivations to achieve their goal of increasing the power of the state, demonstrating understanding of broader historical developments behind the document. So in this document, it uses Adolphus and Cardinal Richelieu as the multiple variables and analyzes the nuance. Nuance means slight differences and showing how Cardinal Richelieu was doing it. So it earns that complex understanding point by doing so. Next is qualifying or modifying an argument by considering diverse or alternative views or evidence. In documents 1 to 2, it will demonstrate that the 30 Years' War started over religious motives, and documents 4 to 6 are being used to show that it was more about politics. The response discusses both religious and political reasons, but argues it was more about politics. The response uses document 1, Emperors trying to comfort and pacify the agitation, and document 2, Bohemia's response in defending its right to practice Calvinism, to point out religious motives. However, it counters that with an analysis of documents 4, 5, and 6 discussing Adolphus's and France's intervention into the war for political reasons. The response emphasizes how the war started as religious but ends politically as Swedish and French intervention. So you're going to do this a lot in English class, qualifying and modifying an argument. And this response qualifies that argument of religious reasons by acknowledging that the start of the war, but counters it with documents 4, 5, and 6, which prove it was political. The response considers diverse viewpoints and evidence by showing that documents 1 and 2 were religious motives, and documents 4 to 6 were more about politics. So it's qualifying that argument. Next up is corroboration, which is confirming the validity of an argument by corroborating multiple perspectives. The document being used is Emperor Matthias' letter to the Bohemian Protestants in 1618, which claims he has no plans to rescind the free exercise of the Protestant religion in Bohemia, therefore there is no reason for Bohemia to take up arms. The response establishes the argument that the true purpose of the 30 Years' War was the gain of power. Document 1 is used to explain how Matthias tries to avoid alienating Protestants by allowing the free practice of religion. But in reality, this is a facade to protect his own power by deterring the Bohemians from taking up arms. The response then corroborates this line of reasoning by suggesting that the coalition of Calvinist nobles and cities is deceptive in that its actual motivation is political rather than being based on religious freedom. This response confirms the validity of an argument using the religion as a pretext for political motives from the differing perspective of a Catholic and Protestant ruler. It uses a Catholic by showing how Matthias wanted to avoid alienating Protestants, but really he was trying to protect his own power, similar to the Calvinist nobles and cities. So they were considering a Catholic perspective and a Protestant perspective to confirm one argument. Next, we have explaining relevant and insightful connections within and across time periods. It's using document 6, which is the Cardinal Richelieu engraving, portraying the cardinal protecting France from Huguenot Protestants and rival Catholic powers. To support an argument that the 30 Years' War can be connected to the Spanish Inquisition, the response uses document 6 to contrast the relatively placid way that Richelieu removed Protestants from France with the violent way in which Philip forced the exodus of Spanish Jews who would not convert. The response continues by noting that Richelieu's approach is less violent than the treatment Huguenots could expect in Spain or Austria. So it makes the connection between the 30 Years' War and the Spanish Inquisition using outside evidence to show an insightful connection that is still on topic and it relates to the argument, gaining that complex understanding point. Now, if you remember, we're going to jump into the second way to gain that complex understanding point, which is actually 4 more multiple ways, but all those ways depend on the question and historical thinking skill being asked for in that question. So now let's recall the historical thinking skills. There are 3 of them. First is causation, which is analyzing the cause or effects that led up to an event or happened as a result of that event. Next up is continuity and change over time, which is analyzing the continuity within a time period and the changes during it. And lastly is comparison, which is comparing and contrasting 2 concepts through main points of argumentation. We use the historical thinking skill in our thesis and complex understanding along with writing our whole essay. Now let's jump in gaining the complex understanding point using the second method. First is cause and effect, which only works for causation questions. The question here is evaluate the long-term or short-term social, political, and economic crises that led up to the 30 Years' War. The response discusses the political or religious causes to the 30 Years' War. To earn the point for complex understanding, the writer must also note some of the effects of the 30 Years' War due to these causes. The writer must utilize transition words such as consequently, for this reason, therefore, as a result of, and etc. The effects must be specific and demonstrate knowledge of the historical developments taking place during the time period. If the question instead asks for the effects for it, do the opposite and note the causes that led up to it. Utilize the appropriate transition words to highlight the change in writing, and remember, it must be relevant and support your argument. Next is similarity and different, which works for comparison questions. Evaluate the extent to which the Italian Renaissance and the Northern Renaissance were different from each other. The response notes the difference between the 2 concepts by analyzing, sourcing, and accurately describing the documents to support their argument. To earn this complex understanding point, the writer must also note the similarities between the 2 using the documents or outside evidence while staying on topic of their prompt. The response utilizes transition words to highlight comparisons such as likewise, similarity, compared to, in comparison, like, and etc. If the question were asking for similarities, instead do the opposite and note the differences between the 2, using appropriate transition words to prove your point and demonstrate your complex understanding of the historical developments to the prompt. Remember, it has to be relevant and support your argument. Next is multiple causes, which works for causation. We're going to use documents 1 and 2 and 4 to 6. 1 and 2 demonstrate how the 30 Years' War was started over religious motives, and 4 and 6 show it became more about politics. The response discusses both religious and political reasons, but makes a clear chronological demarcation between the 2. The transition is based on the intervention of France and Sweden into the conflict. The response uses document 1, Emperor is trying to comfort and pacify the agitation, and document 2, Bohemia's response in defending its right to practice Calvinism. A discussion of religious reasons is followed by an analysis of documents 4, 5, and 6 discussing Adolphus and France's intervention into the war. So it explains that the war was caused by multiple causes and uses both these sets of the documents to show the religious and political causes for this war. And lastly, the final way to earn your complex understanding point is continuity and change. The question is evaluate the changes that happened as a result of the first industrial revolution from 1760 to 1840, and whether they had an overall negative or positive effect on Europe in the 19th century. The response notes the changes in Europe as a result of the industrialization taking place and their impact on Europe. To earn the complex understanding point for continuity and change, the writer must note how some of these things stayed continuous, had a negative or positive impact while staying relevant to the argument. The writer can utilize transition words to highlight the change in writing to the concept of continuity instead of changes. Evidence must be sourced from either the document or prior knowledge. If the question was asking for continuous concepts, do the opposite and note the changes while still following the steps noted above. Remember, whatever you do, it must be relevant and support your argument. Well, that was a long part of the video, but now let's go into some guidelines to keep in mind if you're still with me. Okay, first we remember that when you're using HIP to source your documents, you have to explain how or why. Don't just identify what the HIP is in your documents. Explain how or why it is significant in your argument to earn that point. Next, your historical thinking skill. You have to analyze your question and prompt and keep that skill in mind while writing an essay. It will be the theme of your rhetoric. We're going to go over another video where we analyze the documents, prompt, and pretty much everything on the exam the day of so that we can really get a feel of what to expect. So be on the lookout for that. Next is complex understanding. Remember, it only requires you to do one of the 8 things I showed today, not all of them. Choose the simplest one for your writing and prompt on the day of. Next, analyze and write what you can. You're on a time crunch, so you have to do what you can. And remember, analysis should be the final points you should be doing, especially complex understanding. It is 1 point. Remember, try to get all the other 5 points for evidence. Prioritize the other points before you start getting to analysis. When you get into analysis, ensure that you've got all the other points knocked out the ballpark, because analysis is a long-winded and pretty tough point to nail, so make sure to do the other easy ones first before jumping into it. Let's also note that analysis is pretty hard to go by. Remember, if you don't, most of us won't even nail this point on the first try, so be sure to practice it, because really it takes practice, and it's really about how well you understand your topic. Analysis is the I know AP Euro point. It's the crown jewel of your essay. If you can really nail it, you probably got a good essay. And remember, just because you don't have a complex understanding of your concepts doesn't mean it's not a good essay. A 9 out of 10 is still a damn good essay. Let's move on to some supplemental. As always, look at DBQ questions from the past and scoring commentary. Analyze their analysis and see what they did right and what they did wrong. Also, practice your own sample DBQ questions. We have about a week and 2 days until our exam. Be sure to keep practicing and bulk up on European history concepts, and to receive feedback on your analysis too. Study well and good luck. Here are some references to prepare you for the exam: the 2020 AP History rubric, 2018 sample DBQ responses, and the 2017 ones too. In conclusion, I hope you enjoyed watching today's video, and I hope you learned something new. Next video will be analyzing the question or prompt and the document itself, which is the day of the AP exam. So good luck, happy studying, and I hope you enjoyed today's video.